Hey guys, you're watching the Best Practices Show, where we take a look at the best business practices from the best dental practices all across the country. And if you have a team, which I hope you do, you're looking for secrets for long-lasting success. So today we're just going to go right in there, and I'm going to give you the one secret to long-lasting success in dentistry with one of my top experts, my right-hand person behind the scenes that makes all of this happen with some of the top practices in the country, Leigh and Faight. So you're not going to want to miss this. Grab a pen and hit the share button. We'll see you in a second. Hey guys, welcome back to the Best Practices Show. I am so pumped and we are so incredibly grateful you guys are watching these shows. We're growing like crazy, getting a lot of great feedback. So keep sending it to us because we want to deliver the stuff that you are truly looking for. And today's a super special show for me because I've got my own people, one of my main people, the main people behind the scenes, Leigh and Faight. And I'm going to talk about her a lot. And you'll see why she's so brilliant and she makes a lot of the magic happen behind the scenes. And we're going to give you a great secret today that you are not paying attention to that'll make you very happy long term. Now, a couple show notes. We are shooting this live on Facebook. So if you're watching this right now, do me a favor. Type in a question in the feed and I'll ask Leanne directly, and we want to make sure that we answer your question. Secondly, we love these questions so much and we get so many great ones that we're just giving away an Apple iWatch every single week and 2 tickets to Activate, which is our practice growth seminar that you don't want to miss. So check it out when you get a chance. Now, I want to talk about my guest today because in building any practice or any organization or anything, you know the importance of having great people. Having people is important, but when you get great people, it transforms your life and your business. And I've been blessed by having some great people in my life. And I'll just say this, when this woman came into my life, she transformed our entire organization and upgraded all that we did. And we've watched so many great restorative practices from all over the country have extraordinary results. And sometimes people aren't calibrated in the right direction. And so we're going to get you calibrated today. So if people don't know who Leigh Faight is, Leigh, tell everybody your story, who you are, and what you do here behind the scenes for us.
Sure. So I'm a practice coach. There are 7 of us on the coaching team, and I get to be one of them. I was emailing one of actually the whole coaching team today. Woke up just feeling such a sense of gratitude because what I get to do, my background is in dentistry and in hygiene for many years, but I've always had an itch for leadership and being supportive and guiding teams or groups in a direction that they want to go. And when I got into dentistry and realized what an amazing profession it is, I also realized how much opportunity existed among teams and practices for growth potential, and not just in selling more dentistry, but all the other things that impact a business. So I love what we do, and I think we're pretty awesome. So that makes it even better. Our team is so amazing.
It is fun when you surround yourself with people that are way smarter than you and way more fun than you, and you just sit back and let them roll, and they do have a blast. I don't even know what they're doing half the time. You guys only inform me when I need to be informed, which I absolutely love. Well, yeah. And we're going to talk about why that happened. A lot of us long for this. Now, this has not been an easy road for me, and I'm guessing if you're a dentist watching this isn't an easy road for you. So I want to be authentic about this, but we affectionately call Leigh LA, so I'm going to just refer to her as LA. And so LA, you've seen hundreds and hundreds of practices go through change processes, but what's the one secret to real long-lasting success in dentistry?
So hopefully there are hundreds of people on, and they're going to write this down. It's recare.
No, that's a lie. That's a lie. Yeah, right.
It's not recare at all. And I'm saying that because it's so common for dental practices, for dentists, for business owners to want to know what system, or even maybe identify the system in their practice that's creating the most ineffectiveness. And we want to typically look at the strategies in a business. That's so common. But the one thing that's often overlooked is the health and the organizational health and culture of a business. That's the piece. The strategy, I always say there's two buckets that feed a business. One bucket is the strategic side. It's often, we can sort of think of it as the IQ side of a business. It's the measurable things. It's the strategies. It's the data. We can run a report. We can see where our performance is. That's one side, and that's an important bucket. Both of them feed the business. But the other side is this bucket that feeds the efficiencies and effectiveness of the team and the organization from an EQ side of things. So the emotional intelligence side of things. So you need a little bit of IQ and you need a little bit of EQ. And that is the secret. It's the differentiator to going through a change process and looking at that change process through the lens of strategy and systems, or going through the change process and saying, I'm gonna look as big as I can possibly look at all of the moving parts in this organization and pay attention to the ones that I've never looked at before, or pay attention to the ones that I've looked at and then glanced away because I don't want to go there. That's the challenge in most organizations, Kirk, not just dental practices, but businesses in general, is that it feels like if we talk about health and culture, that it's touchy-feely. I was with a practice 3 or 4 weeks ago, and we were talking about these major components of their business and some of the things that they're struggling with. And the one doc said, are we going to bring our yoga mats and blankets and do trust fall exercises? And it's really just, and he was being funny because he knew, oh man, this is the side of things where it can get sticky, and it doesn't have to be sticky. Right. We have really worked hard in our organization to do the same thing. It doesn't have to be sticky, but it does have to be clear. People have to understand direction. They have to understand pathways. They have to understand the depth of the organization, not just through numbers.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we're going to give you a lot of straightforward stuff to help you today, because this is the stuff that people struggle with long term. And we believe so strongly in this. Nothing trumps organizational health, nothing, except the lack of it. Yeah. So and here's what organizational health is, and LA, if we can define that, and I'll give mine, you give yours. You hear this all the time, patients come first, patients come first. Well, that's a lie. I'm just going to tell you right now, it is a blatant lie. In a super healthy organization, patients never come first. They come second, which means you put your team members first in a way that it's authentic. They can take care of the patients in a way that you could never take care of them. And we see it all the time, LA, when we go to a practice and the patients come first, you can see the dentist is just disconnected to the people around them. And that lends itself to a hot mess in other parts of the practice. How would you define organizational health?
Mm-hmm. Well, let me define two. I'll define two things. I think organizational health is the ability for the organization to look at the influence of our behaviors, our actions, and our choice of the direction we put our efforts and intentions, and identify beyond strategies, what do we need to do to figure out, what's disconnecting us, what's creating politics and confusion. And it's often the fact that, it's a couple things. Number one, it's that the leadership team or the leaders in the organization have not sat down together to identify strategies, operations, values, directions, goals, objectives, all those things that need to be decided before you bring it to the team. So we do that. That's one. Second thing being, once we bring it to the team, we also put it in some sense of some containers. So it's not just, hey, this is the greatest idea. We're going to talk about it, and then we'll have a meeting about it, and then we'll do it. So right. It's putting it in containers, and it's strategizing what's most important to the organization, and then also what's most important to the organization right now.
Right.
So that the team can begin to understand what our focus is. And along with that focus, the team can also understand the reason for the practice's existence, the reason why we have an agreed set of behaviors and what our values are, so we can understand what's being expected of us culturally. And so you know, I think organizational health this is the best way I can describe it. Here's your definition. Organization. So when we look at two things, I always do this. This is how I describe it. So I'm going to keep doing this.
Right.
When we look at two things, organizational health. So we think of meat and potatoes as being the strategy, right? Like I'm going to look at numbers. I'll be evaluating performance indicators. Those things are so crazy important. Organizational health is the plate that the meat and potatoes are served on.
Right.
If we don't look at organizational health, then I said this the other day, and it's such a silly analogy, but it's so true. So if we don't evaluate organizational health, then we put meat and potatoes on a cheap, generic paper plate. It's right. Flimsy, things fall off, it tears, it rips, and we can't figure out why. We can't figure out why good strategies, good evaluation of performance indicators, good production doesn't stick. Why can't we sustain it? Because it's a paper plate, not a porcelain plate. That's why.
Yeah. And Pete Dawson said this years ago. So, you know, you might say, well, that sounds really great, but let's go to the other side of it. Your biggest stress, if you're a dentist and watching this, is that when your practice grows and you've got a few bad apples that you've let into the barrel, and now they're starting to infect the rest of the apples. And that's where your brain and your energy goes all day long. And you go, oh my gosh, I can't deal with this anymore. And Pete Dawson said it to me years ago. He said, with the right people, you can produce twice as much in half of the time with a quarter the stress. Now, it's not about the actual dollar amount. That's the byproduct, because when you're doing what LA is talking about, you get the health right, you get the strategies right. We see this all the time. We have dentists in their 16th, 17th month, or sometimes even their 8th month go, I have never produced this much. And when you ask them, what's your secret? They never go, yeah, I had some monster cases, man, and my preps are just beautiful now. They never say that. They say one thing, I got the right people.
Yeah.
And we're actually healthy now, and we're organized, correct?
Yeah, it's so true. And in the past, when I experienced teams go through a change process, and they take the strategic side of a change process and they put it in place beautifully, Kirk, like beautifully. Systems are so well written, performance evaluations. We look at the numbers in the practice, and we look at all of those things, and yet we still feel like something is missing. It's typically because we haven't yet been daring enough, or the leader hasn't yet been daring enough to say, what we did is just a minimum standard. We evaluated numbers. That's a minimum standard in every practice. We all should be doing that, right?
Right.
What we didn't choose yet to do, and I say this because if you haven't ever, we talk about Carol Dweck. She's an amazing author, and she's got an awesome TED Talk. And she talks about the power of not yet. She wrote an awesome book too. So I always say they haven't yet, because I have all my fingers and toes crossed that everyone who's looking for that one thing will recognize that moving into and beginning to pay more attention to organizational health is not all touchy-feely stuff. It's about how we minimize confusion, minimize politics, maximize rather our energies going in the right direction. And when we choose organizational health, and I'm making it sound like it's I'll just pick it up off of the shelf and I'll choose it and here it is. It's not that easy. I know that. It's simple. It isn't easy. But when we choose that, things that we do on the strategy side, and you know this, Kirk, things that we do on the strategy side stick, and they stick long. And it's just amazing. It's this harmonious process that is different when you choose strategy over or only in this process. So.
Right. And, you know, I love this conversation because we can give great context to it and so many examples. Like, here's a good one. What happens when you don't have organizational health at home or good cultural health at home? I mean, it's a disaster, and it bleeds into one other thing. So how, you know, I always ask people when I speak, how important is it to have a healthy group of people mentally and emotionally around your table, whether it be your dinner table or the table in the back? Like, nothing trumps that. And you say this all the time in our training session. We have people from all over the world come, and you say, hey, look, all the answers, they're at your table.
Yeah.
Because we're going to give you the strategies, we're going to give you the numbers, we're going to give you all the systems. But what really makes this come alive, the multiplier, is when we authentically start working together, and then things just take off in a way that you could never imagine with them. And you and I were talking about this before we got started. Some of my favorite teams, we see them in the third recare cycle or the second recare cycle come back to our training, and I watch how they communicate with other teams. That one team in Ohio, and I saw them the first time, and I saw the fear in their eyes. And the second time, they're telling other teams, no, you make those patients pay. They show up, and they've got to follow your rules. And I was like, who are you? That is so great. And now they own it.
Exactly. And then the third and the fourth time you see them interacting with our community, they're like, oh, you're still thinking that it's all about systems.
Right.
Yeah. Well, and I want to go back to what you just said, because it's so like, that's like, we should just stop right now after what you just said, which is the best secrets to the success of what's going to happen in your business and what's possible in your business. You have to begin at the table together. Right. You have to begin figuring out a way, not just to sit down and figure out how to take that awesome idea from the CE that you just went to, but how do we begin to have real, authentic conversations about where we think these CE ideas will work and not work, why, coming up with solutions, and being very open and authentic about, there's this great model that Patrick Lencioni talks about in the 5 dysfunctions, which it's so funny. I always reframe his work and say the 5 behaviors of a cohesive team. So the second behavior in these 5 behaviors is conflict. Mm-hmm. And so first one being trust, second one being conflict. Well, I think everybody shies away from the idea that you don't want to invite conflict into a practice or any organization. And that's a myth. Yes, you do. Because if you don't look for and mind for healthy conflict, you don't ever get the next level, that sticking point to where everybody says, okay, I had my voice heard. And I realized that while I might not think this is the best idea, my attitude is such that I have to be all in. I'm willing to be all in because I had a chance for my voice to be heard. And then there's this all in mentality.
Right.
What happens though, Kirk, instead is we don't want to slow down for meetings. We certainly don't want to mind for conflict. So we just say we're going to do something. And then you and I get the call 4 to 6 weeks later or 4 to 5 months later, like, my team is driving me nuts. They won't do what I say to do. Right. And, we're having like these hit yourself in the head moments. Like, of course they won't. Right. And I wouldn't either, Kirk. You and I, we have all sorts of disagreements in health. The bottom line is, though, we want conflict in our organization, conflict around the right ideas and the right thoughts. But we want that because I want people to have a chance for their voices to be heard, and people fear and they shy away from that. And I could talk for 4 more hours about this. So, well, I love that because you guys will yell at me a lot. You'll go, and I invite that conflict too, because I am being the leader, I'm the one that gets in my way the most. And I have a lot of blind spots. And the cool part is that we all want the same thing.
is, transparency is huge. And we got a great question here from Deepak, and I want to give it to you. But I want to say one thing, just piggyback on that. And if you're a dentist watching this, let me give you a question. When you have the right chairside assistant, how important is that to you clinically? It changes your life. It changes your whole entire life. Now, the key to having the right dental assistant is you being the right dentist for that, because the best dental assistants aren't floating around. They just show up in your office. They show up because they want to work for this person who is behavioral healthy, and they will kill for you. I can take any dental assistant in the country, and I can look in her eyes or his eyes, and I can ask him a couple questions, and I can tell you whether the practice is killing it or they're struggling. And it's the confidence and it's the overall health of what you're talking about. Now, Deepak asked this question. This is awesome, my friend. Just curious, your thoughts on the old debate. Does strategy follow structure or structure follow strategy? Awesome question.
Wow, that is super interesting. So I think it's a little bit of both. Yes. I know you want me to choose one over the other. And actually, this is something in our coaching program. We juggle a lot. It depends going into when we begin our work with clients. One of the things we very intentionally do is spend a lot of time on the front end getting to know the organization. Right. I was actually talking with a oral surgery practice yesterday, and I'm going to go see them next week. And one of the things that I asked her is, first of all, tell me in your organization, just give me a laundry list of the things that are working. And she goes, what? Working? And I said, yeah, working. Like what's working? And she goes, I did not expect for you to ask me a question about what works. Mm-hmm. And so for Deepak and for anybody who's listening, one of the things we try to do is sort of manage both sides of the change process and acknowledging that there are things in the organization, tons of things that work. If there's a lot work and it's centered around strategy, but we're having a tough time having those things stick, then I know maybe culturally we have to work on, well, maybe the team doesn't have a platform for conversation. And the platform I'm speaking to is not like we have this open forum and everybody just speaks their mind. Right. I'm saying that the platform is once the leadership team or the docs sit down and identify to the team, this is why we exist. This is who we are. These are the behaviors and the values that this organization will abide by. Right. Then the platform is that. That's the plate I was talking about. Right. And so I guess my answer is it's both. If I can see a lot of systems in place, but yet the doc's saying we're still having a tough time with everything that seems strategy, I know then we have to look at the other side.
Right. And I would totally piggyback and completely agree with you. It's strategy, structure, and I'd also add a third piece that keeps those two together, which is called chemistry. I mean, take a look at any sports team. Being a Kansas City Royals fan for years, and watching them go from the worst to first in that segment, they were a bunch of minor leaguers. I mean, they weren't even really good baseball players, but Dayton Moore brought them together, and he said, we had one goal. It was chemistry. I needed the right chemistry. Those kids believed in each other, and it was amazing. So, Deepak, your question is awesome. And I would also say that if you don't have, you guys know how this works in your practice. When you've got that chemistry, you walk by an op, you go, that is awesome. Hey, that was great. I don't know how you did that, but that was freaking fantastic. There's a multiplying effect that happens. It isn't 1 + 1 = 2. It's 1 + 1 = 11 now, because you're like, I don't even know how you guys did that. Now, let me go to the DSOs. And I just want to say this. DSOs who have hundreds of millions of dollars at their hands, their number one problem overwhelmingly is doctor retention. So you can talk about strategy and execution. They have some of the best systems in the world, best marketing in the world, best metrics, best everything. But the one thing that they don't have sometimes is culture. Because if you keep a doctor producing and they're happy, I mean, that's the multiplying effect. So it's not just private practice, it's across the board. You look at companies like Zappos. You get the right people, you get the right ball player on any NFL team to change the clubhouse, they start winning. So yeah. Now go into the core values now, because we want to give people a recipe. So if you're watching this and you go, hey, look, I want that. I'm going to say the foundation for this, would you agree? You're starting with those questions is really you as a doctor sitting down and saying, what are our core values? Can you explain what those are? Sure.
I will say this though first. I think if we're looking at what's the next thing that I could do to plug in and make this begin to work, I think the first thing is to spend a little time as a leader or as a leadership team, recognizing your own behaviors that have impacted the organization in the past. And that's the EQ side of things, right? It's not repenting our sins and saying we've done all these things wrong, but I do think it's important to pay attention to the ego side of this process and make sure, I believe this is a philosophy I always abide by, and man, is it really helpful in leadership, is in every given situation, we are contributing to how something is going.
Right.
So when we begin our work with doctors and leadership teams, one of the first things we ask them to do is begin to recognize that the way that things are, they have contributed intentionally or unintentionally. It's still the impact. The outcome is what it is. So the first thing that I would say, Kirk, is before you can even sit down and write down values, it's even, you and I had some of these crazy awesome moments a couple summers ago that, you can create the why and have your purpose. And I know Cynic speaks to this amazingly, and he should, because I get it. The why is so crazy important. But sometimes we draw this picture, our why, and it's very, on canvas, it looks beautiful. But if we don't take a step back and recognize the impact of our own behaviors and how things got to where they are, trying to impose this on your team, hey, I've got a new way, we're going to abide by core values and all these, it's going to feel like, we're painting the side of a barn with chipping paint. Right. We paint it and it looks pretty for a second, but a couple months later, that paint is chipping again. So we do have to peel back the layers. I love this. Tiffany and I were talking about this yesterday. We have to peel back the layers and figure out, well, where the heck did this start? And a strong leadership team is willing to say, it probably started here.
Right, with you. Right. And I just want to piggyback on that too, because what you're really talking about is self-awareness. The self-awareness and leadership capabilities of the dentist or the owner determines how far the organization goes. And I'll just say this, there are a lot of people in dentistry that are completely unaware of how their behavior impacts people and their business. And I am no exception to the rule. I suck at a lot of stuff, and I can cause more problems, and you can attest to this, in my own organization, where they'll just go, don't come in here because you screw a lot of things up. We've got it. Like, just go do what you do. And the same thing applies to a dentist watching this. When you're doing what you do and you let people grow, that's when it all starts to happen. And big organizations have what are called 360s. Which they'll sit down the leader and they'll give the leader unfiltered feedback because they want, and some people aren't ready for that, because they want the organization to grow and they're limited by the leader. So
right,
keep
but
going.
Can I say this, Kirk? One of the things I want to make sure we acknowledge, and you saying what you said, is the reason why we can do that, the reason why we can say to you, go, get out, we've got this, or we don't even tell you that we're doing something, is because A, there's a high level of trust, both directions. B, I know at any given time, and you know as well, we can have the conversations like, that just sounded ridiculous, or that's stupid. I don't think that's going to work. So we have the ability to go into conflict. We have to mine for it. We can do all those things. And this is the big piece, and this is coming back to the values question you asked me a minute ago, and because we know our core values. Right. So it's so funny. This is sort of hot off the press, but Barb and I were talking about something this morning before we had this call. And I said to Barb about this idea that I had, and I was like, listen, it abides by these many sets of our values. So I don't have to run it past Kirk. I know these are our values. This is what we want to make sure we're doing every day, all day in our interactions with our community. And if it can abide by those values and it meets our why, it's the right idea. Now, don't get me wrong. We'll tell you about the idea later, Kirk, once we put it into action. But really, the reality of it is that what you just suggested is the common thread, or this safety that we can put all of our ideas into, the safety container that we can put our ideas into, has to be centered around the team knowing enough. They need to know enough about the values that created this organization. They need to know enough about the aspirational values or the aspirational behaviors that we want to work towards. So they need to know enough about the most appropriate behaviors of an organization. And they need to know the why. So they need to know those pieces. They just have to, Kirk. Otherwise, what I see happen all the time in organizations is this constant ping pong process where I don't know if it's a good idea. Let me go to my doctor or my leadership team, see if it's a good idea, and then we'll go back to the team and then we'll talk about the idea. If we know enough about what's important, why it's important, and the appropriate behaviors and align them with our values, do it. Do it. But that's the piece of organizational health that not everybody wants to slow down to work through because it feels sticky. And my yoga instructor always says when we try something new like this and we're in this awkward stretch, our body feels really crunchy and it doesn't feel smooth, like as if when we practice it enough that we go into that yoga pose and we're like, wow, this feels really good. It will feel crunchy in the beginning because it's so different. Right. We're so used to meat and potatoes.
Yeah, absolutely. And so what you're referring to, the core values exercise, I've known about this forever. We've done it in the past. But one thing that's really cool about aging is when you get older, you just have less tolerance for the way things used to be. And so I encourage people just to, if you haven't done this, and you want the one secret to long-lasting success in dentistry, this is not a democratic discussion. This is not a collaborative discussion. If you started the business and you own it, it is your responsibility to sit down with a white piece of paper and go, this is who I am. Yeah. This is my DNA, and this is what I'm about, because your core values will never change. Now, here's why this is so important. This is why Leigh said, these become the laws, essentially, in which your organization operates. You can talk about vision, all that kind of stuff, which is crazy important. But as you design systems and you decide what you're going to do and how you do it, you can go, is that us? And if people don't fit your core values, that's what the beauty of this is. It's not good, bad, or indifferent. You can set them free and they can go and do their own thing. And this also works for your patients. If you're a restorative dentist and you've been doing this for 20 years, your favorite patients that sit in the chair in front of you, they care about the same things that you care about. Your least favorite patients, you try to convince them every day of the things that you care about and they're not interested. Doesn't mean it's bad. The United States of America allows us to create a business now where your core values can drive the whole business. And that's where the magic starts to happen. Other pitfalls that you see in this whole process, because you guys roll up your sleeves and we get heavy into strategies, systems, but there's other pitfalls that we see.
Yeah, well, I think Deepak's question is genius because that's probably the pitfall we notice the most is one of the things about working with our company that I just think is so phenomenal that we want to give leadership teams and organizations and doctors the autonomy, and obviously you're running the business, right? To drive the agenda of a change process, so significantly that we always say our job is to not show up with our agenda. Our job is to show up with your agenda organized. Right. And that's how we go about our coaching. And so what Deepak is asking is one of the biggest challenges in coaching is this balance between, wanting to appeal to the doc and saying, yes, okay, yes, we'll do strategy. Yes, I know you need a recare system in place. Yes, I know we need to evaluate AR, but what about what's going on over here? No one will even look at each other in the eye. We've written, systems for 9 months now. And why aren't these systems sticking? And so I think it's probably one of our greatest challenges in a change process or in a coaching program is when to push forward the agenda of organizational health over strategy so that we can get to and quicker move through systems and strategies and processes. So I think it's both. And I think it's tough for teams to understand that, just like, well, it's tough for anybody to understand. It's tough for me to understand how come this is speaking to the concept of change, which is probably we all struggle with it, right? How come if I eat salad on day 1 and day 2, on day 3, we don't feel 10 times healthier and, lose all the weight we want to lose? How come that doesn't work? And I think that's actually the same concept or thinking that teams have, is how come if we write a system on the second day or the second month, it's not working awesomely? And I think one of the things that we have discovered throughout the years in working with teams is our program is a lot like a college, like a degree. You'll first write systems in a 100s version, thinking, right? So we know what we know enough to write the system. It always surprises teams when we say, well, you're going to go back to those systems and you're going to reevaluate. I'm like, well, we already have. It works. And then you go back and you look at all these systems and you figure out that about 80% of what they wrote, they're not even doing. And they're wondering, like, I wonder why it's not sticking. Well, I can tell you why.
Right.
So that strategy side is crazy important too. And I want to make sure that what everybody is hearing is it's not organizational health alone. It's that we can no longer afford, if we want to go from good to great, if we want to have or understand that differentiating factor in an organization, we cannot alone keep revisiting strategy.
Right. Now, there's things that get in the way of this process, and sometimes you pointed to it. It's the dentist not seeing their own blind spots because they think, they don't understand how their behavior impacts. But there's also times where team members, to no fault of their own, their beliefs or behaviors or past experience gets in the way of the dentist, and this is a big one because there are team members who are like, I don't want things to change because we've always been doing it this way. Let's keep doing it, which is the worst reason to do anything. And then there are people that just suck the life out of you. Now, I'm going to point to this because this ends up being one of the things that holds a lot of practices back. They'll have one or sometimes 2 energy suckers, where a sucker will come in and just suck the life out of everybody, what's happening in the practice or other people. And what's dangerous is you don't really have ones. Now you're going to get a second one and a third one because they're going to have to co-suck with other people.
Well, sure. Collusion comes into play.
Right. Now, as a dentist, I want to know what you're thinking, but we have to, as the owner, you've got to weed the garden. So when weeds start coming up in the garden, it's your responsibility to pull the weed out, or before you know it, the weeds take the garden.
Yeah. And that's why organizational health is so important, Kirk, because this happens. I remember when I first started coaching, I was talking with a doc who was having a tough time articulating to his team the set of behaviors he wanted them to have, or the set of standards and behaviors he wanted the organization to have. So instead, he came to me and said, how do I talk with so-and-so about this negative behavior, this negative behavior, this negative behavior? And my answer to him at first, because I'm a smarty pants. You are. Was a little bit. Yeah. Was, well, when's the last time you had any conversation with this person? Like any conversation, not just, I need the, articulating paper, blah, blah, blah. Okay. And then when is the last time you gave her any type of positive feedback? And then when is the last time you sat down for performance reviews? And have you ever talked about the set of behaviors and standards that this organization and the people in it will abide by? They will. And of course, you probably can guess the answer. It was like none of those things. And he was, and this is, he will forever be one of my most favorite people to work with, because he came into the coaching program as a brand new dentist, trying to own a business that he was taking over from his father. And strategy was what was in his mind. But very, very quickly, he realized that the one thing that was going to minimize the stress in his organization beyond systems was going to be to sit straight his entire team and let them know this is how this culture and this organization is going to run. And he stuck his feet into the ground and followed that path the entire way and never wavered. And he had some change. He had some transition. He had some rumbling. And he never wavered. And when we see him now, he is, oh my gosh, he's doing so well. And they're producing more than that practice has ever produced. They're just doing it a little differently.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is the value in coaching. Now, there's a lot of great coaches out there, and I'm certainly not going to say we're the only. I'm biased. We are pretty cool. We are pretty cool. But the cool part in the coaching process is that when you have somebody that's going to hold you accountable and help you through the storm and say, look, we're going to get through this. I don't care how difficult it is. We're going to get you to the other side, and you're going to become the dentist that you've always wanted to be. Hell or high water, we're getting you there. There's something powerful that happens. And as human beings, we're not designed to get to reach our potential by ourselves in any capacity. Yep. The thing that we teach dentists, and I'll just give you, if you're watching this right now, write this down because this is a paramount truth. It is crazy important. It is better to be clear than it is to be nice. And I'll say it over and over again, and it's my number one problem. It is better to be clear than it is to be nice, because what you do, in some cases, you trade one for the other. And I do that all the time. I'm nice, and I trade it for the clarity, and that confuses more people. Your team and your patients want one thing. They want clear from you. And once you start getting clear, that's when the magic starts to happen for you, and people can opt in or opt out. And you can look back at a very fruitful career of, hey, look, this was my practice. Now, I want to say one more thing, Ellie, because you said that. People always ask us, can you improve growing a production in a practice is actually crazy easy. We can grow any production. In any practice. We can double any production, but there's a cost for anything. There's a cost for it. And I don't know if that's a good goal. I really don't, because I don't care what people produce. And we've had several experts on the show, and they're like, we get dentists that come to us all the time. If I'm at 1.2 million, if you could get me to 1.7, I think I'll be happy. I'm like, buddy, do you know how much dentistry that is? I mean, do you know how much responsibility that is? And some of these people have 80% overheads. I don't care how much dentistry you produce. That is a lot of stress for little money. I'd much rather see you keep what you produce, keep it right there, or we'll always grow it, but keep half of it and have a healthy group of people around the table, because there's only so much you're going to make as a private care dentist. Now, if you're going to have multiple locations, like 9 locations, because everybody thinks that's the epiphany too. Talk to anybody that owns 3 or 4 locations, and you will see that is a whole nother ball game. And chances are they don't get a lot of sleep either, because they're managing now 150 team members. So I think the organizational health, the financial health, all of these, what we're talking about, your overall physical health, your relationship health, like your patient's health. I mean, we get a long list of this. Like, there's nothing that trumps health. Any one of your problems can be fixed, except a health problem. Right. Bankruptcy can be fixed, but sometimes a health problem can't. So you said, I want to go back and talk about one of the things you said, because it's so true. So we help practices every day grow their business, the strategy side of it. That is one of the things that we do. The differentiator for us, among what I have noticed in hearing other doctors talk about, previous change processes they went through, is that we will also look at this very, this piece of the pie that we're talking about today. We will also look at the strategy as baseline. Strategy is monitoring where you were and where you are today. We will also look at the organizational health side. But what I wanted to say is when practices grow, and when we grow production, and when we minimize overhead, and when we look at all of those things, and at halfway through, or 12 months or 18 months into it, and we say, oh my gosh, look at how awesome this is. Mm-hmm. Let's just take the best month ever on record. Right. Production was up, collections was up, it's fireworks, it's awesome. What happens often is
practices don't take the time to slow down and sit together at the table and say, what made this work?
Right.
Or even cooler than that is when we have our not so great month on record, like, oh my gosh, that was the worst month ever. We also won't take the time to sit down as an organization and say, what influenced that? What could we do differently? That's a component of organizational health, is sitting down and identifying what we said we wanted to do, looking at the outcomes of what actually happened, and as an organization coming up with all the possible solutions that can create to have that be different. Or, geez Louise, writing down the recipe for the best dinner you've ever made. One of my favorite things outside of dentistry, one of my passions is I love to cook. And my husband always says that, you're awesome at cooking, but it sucks because you create these amazing recipes just with, I'll just take this ingredient and that ingredient and mix it all up and it tastes good, but I can never replicate it. Well, I'm very cognizant that in coaching and in dentistry, we must slow down every process to know what are all the ingredients that went in and contributed to that being this way or not this way. And organizational health is a piece of that, slowing down the process and looking at what worked and what didn't work. And that's probably one of my favorite things that I get to do with teams is, and it was funny because I was just talking to one of my teams in Florida, this was probably 6 or 8 weeks ago. And they had their best month on record in their entire practice. And he's been practicing for 16 years, best month ever. And so I was like, woo! But it was really short. And he was like, I already know what you're going to say, so I beat you to the punch. He said, I said to my team when we celebrated our best month on record, it was in February. He said, if I get on the phone with Leanne and say we had our best month on record and I don't give her at least 2 to 3 reasons of why it's our best month on record, he said, I'd rather beat you to the punch. And so he was ready, because we can't replicate what we don't know when we don't know why it worked.
Right. And you have to know that. And, and a lot of times we see this practices plateau, they get stuck and they can't go any farther by working any harder. And they got to know why. They have to be able to replicate it. And they've got to be able to think and engage and just behave differently. And that's when it all comes together. Now, let me show you how this works behind the scenes. Because you might say, oh, Leah, that sounds great. But I'll just tell you, and you could do this too, call any dental office in the United States. And just ask the person who picks up the phone, just, hey, can you just tell me about your dentist? Like, how cool is your dentist? And they go, yeah, I mean, he's great. He's got some training and he's accredited and he's been to several institutes. And you're like, oh, you really love that person, don't you? And you can't fake this. You can't, because what happens is when you get the trust, you have the transparency, you get all the strategies, the systems, the structures. It's the perfect cocktail. And you call somebody you call an office like call Ritter and Ramsey. I mean, they don't love they don't like their doctors. They freaking love them, and they will sell them all day long, and they will jump in front of a bus. I mean, I would think by the time I meet one of these guys, they better have an S on their chest. And by that time, the patient's already in love with the whole organization. And so everybody wants that, but nobody wants to do the hard work that allows that to happen. It's no different than a marathon. Everybody wants to run a marathon, but nobody wants to do the training. They just want the medal. And the hard part is sitting down and communicating with these people. And we see it all the time. There are high producing practices, and the dentist will go, I can't stand my assistant. I can't stand her. And I'm like, you've worked with her for 10 years. I can't stand her. I'm like, what a perpetual hell that is. Well, she's really good clinically. Well, I mean, so what? I mean, how would you want to spend 10 years next to somebody you can't stand? But they also don't know that they're, if not half the problem, more of the problem. So we could go on tangents on this.
I know.
Let's narrow this down. Like last couple of pieces, because I know you have to run pretty soon. What are some other pieces of advice that you would say are the secrets or a few secrets for long-lasting success in dentistry to a young dentist that might be watching this?
Oh boy, to a young dentist, know that this is this is the biggest differentiator in a practice. Composite materials and changing from one brand to another is helpful. It'll change your restorative practice. But when you bring your team together and get really clear, I mean, you talked a minute ago about it's better to be clear than it is to be nice. So the step prior to being clear is the leadership team or the business owners, partners have to sit down themselves and be very clear among their team. I mean, Kirk, you and Barb and I have been working on this for a long time now, sitting down and working on, not getting it right, but working on clarity. Because before you can bring clarity to your team, you have to be working on clarity among the leadership team and or you yourself as a business owner. So one thing is, know what you want. Know what is most important to you. Know what you're willing to flex on and what is rigid in your world as far as what you want your organization to be. Know who you want to be in your organization. Be willing. This is the one thing, Kirk, here it is. Be willing to slow down enough and spend time around the table. So many practices freak when we tell them that we're going to make you get out of production time and spend time with your team. Now, it's not to hold hands and talk about what you're having for lunch. It's to work through the strategies. And around that table is where you will begin to better understand the workings and the ingredients that are at your table that you're going to pour into that recipe. And that's my one piece. My one piece, if I could leave you and remind our teams, is be willing to slow down and spend some time working on your practice instead of always working in your practice.
Yeah, you have to land the airplane to fix it. You can't fix it in the air, which a lot of people do. And I heard this great quote from Dr. Ian Buckle at the Dawson Academy retreat. He said this: if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together. And that's so true in your practice, with your family, interdisciplinary relationships. It always works better and more long lasting when it's together than it is alone.
Yeah. And so I'll add one more quote. It's not a quote. I'm terrible at quotes, by the way. But you just said, if you want to go far, go together. It's the other thing is be willing to be a pioneer and do, when you think about pioneers, why were they pioneers? Because they went in a direction no one else had gone. Yeah. So also this is sort of re-engineering your pathway or the path that you can create for practice success. Be willing to go down a road nobody else has gone down. Right. And if your passion is big enough and your clarity is clear enough, people will follow you. I'm so inspired, Kirk, by all of the things that you bring to our organization. Your passion alone when you're on stage or when you're with our team it's just palpable. And that passion doesn't have to look the same to every organization as it does in Kirk Barron's, but passion alone leads teams to follow you down a path that nobody else has ever gone. And it's, again, I cannot say enough, it's a differentiating factor between good businesses that are doing cool things and amazing practices that you can barely even describe how awesome they are. They have culture and a healthy one.
Absolutely. And so if you're looking for that culture and you're looking for a path to get things rolling, you got to do something. I would say if you're watching this, you have to do something. You just can't sit there and repeat this over and over again, because to do something wrong once is okay, but to repeat it is just stupid. And so I think changing the path and changing the culture, you got to find a catalyst for that. Now, it doesn't have to be our course, but if you're looking for something, we created this course specifically for this, for a lot of people, that you're going to get a ton of information. Obviously, we're going to bury you with strategy and systems and structures. And we're actually, it's a huge manual. It will overwhelm you. But there are certain points where you just got to sit in a room with your team and go, look, let's do this. And I authentically want your team to look at you and say to you, doctor, we got to do this. We got to do this for us. We got to do this for you. We got to do this for our patients. I want a better life. I want a better life in our practice. And if you're looking for something like that, we created our own seminar. It's called Activate. It's almost sold out for the June course, which is, I think it's June 22nd or 23rd. There's a link right there. If you're looking for something, sign up for it. Don't even think about it. You will absolutely love it, and it's going to be in Chicago, and nobody can say I can't get to. If you can't get to Chicago, you've got other problems. So, and our coaches will all be there. We'll be there to help you roll up our sleeves and make sure that you guys are completely transformed by the time you leave. So there's a link there. Check it out. And any other last words you want to say, LA, before we say goodbye? Because I know you got to run.
Just thank you. Just thanks for everybody checking in. Thanks for taking time to listen and be curious about what else there is in dentistry besides awesome crowns.
Yeah,
because
absolutely.
there's so much more. And that level of fulfillment is achieved when you sort of step outside of your comfort zone. So
right.
I think
I'll end with this. There are people out there that fix teeth, and there are people out there that change lives. Those are two completely separate businesses. You just have to choose which business you want to be in. So we are crazy grateful. LA, stay on just for a second.
Sure.
Thank you so much, everybody, for watching. Love your comments. Love your feedback. Keep watching. And if you're watching this after the live broadcast, please continue to add your questions. You'll see how awesome Leanne is. She'll get back to you in very thoughtful responses. And until we see you next time, keep watching the Best Practices Show. You guys have an awesome day.